Debbyites, welcome to Emmy season 2018. This is our first slugfest with what I like to call the A-Team. I'm here with Amanda Spears, Matt Noble, Riley Chow, Tony Ruiz and Zach Laws. And we are going to talk about all things Emmys. It's still early days yet. There's a lot of things that haven't even premiered. But we seem to think we have a pretty good idea as to what is in and what is likely out. And we're going to talk about the comedy series race, and then we'll talk about some of the acting categories as well. So first up, in Outstanding Comedy Series, generally speaking, as you all know with the Emmys, you look at what got nominated last year, and then you subtract the things that aren't eligible, and then you kind of figure out how many slots you got. So last year, Veep won, but it's not in the running this season, and Master of None is not eligible because obviously it didn't air a third season. And then the other nominees were Atlanta, Blackish, Modern Family, Silicon Valley, and Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. And they are all in the running again. And then you've got a whole bunch of new shows, revivals. There's a whole range of things going on in comedy. It's actually pretty exciting for a change. Normally with comedy, I'm just kind of, snoring because I'm so bored. This season, not so much. So I'd like to go to Matt Noble first because
Yes.
being biased, Australians have to go first, just this one time. So Matt, what do you think? Like, where are you at right now with comedy? Have you got a show in mind that you think is pretty much has this locked up, or do you think it's a really open, fluid race?
It's an open field. No one's got it locked up just this yet, especially with Veep, the winner from the last 2-3 years bowing out or sitting this year's out. It sort of could go anywhere. I'm thinking Modern Family might finally drop off the list this year too, making 3 open slots. I feel like the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel has done well, could take one of those slots. I feel like maybe the return of Arrested Development could get back in. And I feel like the winner is going to be Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Really? Yeah. Wow, that's exciting. Okay. Well, Amanda, we just talked about Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. I know you're a huge Amy Sherman-Palladino fan. Do you think that's out in front?
Well, I think when you look at all the categories Emmy-wise, I think we can probably agree it's most likely on the comedy side going to be the most nominated show.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to rack up a lot of award nominations, and look out for someone like Tony Shalhoub to get in. Look out for Jane Lynch. I mean, when you start adding those up, if they're smart and they just submit the pilot and writing and directing, yeah, I think it could be maybe the one to look out for. But also, this is Silicon Valley's first chance as HBO's premiere comedy. So if they can get Kumail Nanjiani in, if they can get Thomas Middleditch back, then all of a sudden it starts looking really good because we know the writers and the directing branch loves it. But I'm a little hesitant on all of these revivals because they've been rewarded. Maybe their time's just passed, but we'll have to wait and see. We haven't seen Roseanne and we haven't seen Arrested Development yet.
Mm-hmm. Riley, what about you?
I would say Glow actually gets more nominations because it's in it's a half hour, so it's eligible for all those half-hour categories. Plus, I think the hair and the makeup and that kind of stuff is a bit more showy. But I do think The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel is out front for the Emmy. It did win the Producers Guild Award, which, they're the only guild that's actually awarding Best Comedy Series, and they also have a very strong track record, except for the past few years.
What about you, Zach?
Well, this is one of those things where since there are presumably two empty slots in the comedy series race, including the show that just won 3 years in a row, we feel like, there's endless possibilities, which there do seem to be. The only problem is finding which of these new shows and revivals are going to take the place of those two that are not returning, possibly even more, as Matt said, because I'm just going to keep predicting Modern Family until it stops getting nominated, even after they go off the air. But you bring up a good point. Maybe it has had diminishing returns over the years. Maybe something like Kimmy Schmidt or even Blackish could drop out. We don't know. But then you say, all right, well, what is going to get in? Certainly, Mrs. Maisel looks like it's in a really good place. But that aired last year. So maybe it'll get looked over in favor of something that they're going to watch more recently, like Silicon Valley, which we haven't seen yet, or even like Atlanta, which is airing right now and probably was in second place last year. We don't know how these revivals are going to do. You know, Will and Grace has been kind of, you know, picking up nominations at the Globes and stuff like that. And Curb Your Enthusiasm has done very well. But, you know, maybe they won't dip back into that well. Certainly Will and Grace more has to deal with the fact that it's a multicam network sitcom, and those haven't been getting in lately. Same thing with Roseanne, which we haven't seen yet, so we don't know how that's going to do. And, you know, I hear Arrested Development's going to be ready in time, but haven't seen frame one of it yet. And the last time they came back, they didn't do exceptionally well, so who knows? Which is all to say that I don't know what I'm predicting right now. I'm just going with Atlanta right now by default, but, right. You know, I'm waiting.
Speaking of Atlanta, I'm loving this new season. It's fantastic. I wasn't a fan the first season, to be completely honest, but this one's, there's something about it. I'm really enjoying it. I think it's going to do very well. Tony, I know you loved Atlanta. What do you think about the comedy race?
I think that, right. I mean, the revivals pose such an interesting problem because we're in this new kind of frontier of these revivals that we don't know how the Emmy voters are going to react to this. Certainly, Will and Grace has been extremely popular, considering that the first season hasn't even finished airing yet, and they've already extended the number of episodes for season 2, and they've picked it up for an 18 episode third season. So that is certainly a show that could be popular, but then again, it also fell off during its last couple of years on the air where it wasn't even nominated, and not even all the actors were nominated. So I think when you look at the race as it stands right now, I think the two to really watch the closest are Mrs. Maisel, and I'm not even as big of an Amy Sherman Palladino fan because I never watched Gilmore Girls, but I loved. I didn't say anything bad about it. I just never saw it.
I'm trying not to curse at you.
I love Mrs. Maisel. I watched that whole show in about 3 days.
Wow.
I just absolutely love it. And Rachel Brosnahan in that pilot episode,
fantastic,
is one of the absolute best performances I've ever seen. To the point that even if Veep was coming back and if Julia Louis-Dreyfus was nominated, I think she'd have a real competitor in Rachel Brosnahan. So, but for the time being, I think it's between Atlanta and Mrs. Maisel, and I completely agree with you, Rob. I thought the first season of Atlanta was a masterpiece, and I think this season is even better in the 4 episodes that they've aired so far.
Yeah, it's really.
And this is kind of just a full circle moment for Amy Sherman Palladino, because the last time she was nominated for an Emmy was for Roseanne. So to have to compete against the show that kind of got her started, it's kind of like a full circle. I had to mention that.
Let's talk about Roseanne, because obviously we all know that show was never nominated in the comedy series category over its run, especially when it was the #1 show on TV. You know, we all think about how that was such a crime for the Emmys back in the day. I remember thinking, why can't this show get nominated? And finally Roseanne won, and Laurie Metcalf won 3 times, and Sarah Gilbert was nominated a few times. So it did get some love, but it never got that big prize. And I think that will continue. Full disclosure, I've seen the first 3. I think some of you might have already seen it as well. I think it's brilliant. It's my #1 show of all time, and I'm very happy for it to be back. And I think it's just as good as it was when, in its heyday, forgetting about its last 2 or 3 seasons, which were rubbish.
I was going to say, I mean.
Yeah, they were rubbish. But,
there was a reason those didn't get nominated.
Yeah. But I don't know where I sit with Roseanne. At the moment, I don't have it really coming back much at all, apart from John Goodman and Laurie Metcalf at this point. And also, I think Glow is going to be more of a contender than many people are giving it credit for. It's done so well across the guilds, and I just think that we have to be looking at that. And with Will and Grace, it's disappointed a little bit in terms of some of the precursors. So I don't know whether it's necessarily going to be as much of a player as we all think or hope. And then Curb Your Enthusiasm, I don't know as well. Like, I just don't. I think it came and it went, and didn't really seem to make as much of an impact as I thought it would. So I'm all over the shop with comedy series. What do you guys think? I'm just going to open it up. What do you think about Roseanne, and what do you think about? And what does the dog think about Roseanne?
I'm sorry. He just is. Sorry about that. I think it's going to depend on what people's feeling of the Trump aspect of it is. If people get this like, ooh, no feeling, or if it's really thoughtful and insightful, it could actually help them. But that could be a big problem. But yeah, I think John Goodman and Laurie Metcalf are almost automatically in.
We think so.
The rest of it, well, I think Laurie Metcalf more has and please award her if you're going to nominate her. She's been to 400 award shows this year, people, and has lost way too many times. Sorry, some of us
she
are
has
so
her
upset.
Emmys, though.
Yeah. She has her Emmy. She's got 3 of them.
But she has lost more Emmys now than she has won.
True.
Oh.
She has lost 7 Emmys now. So
well, the same thing is true of just about anybody at the Emmys. I mean, I would
ask Martin Sheen how many Emmys he's lost.
Yeah.
Well,
Jennifer Garner. There's heaps of them. Anyway, sorry, Zach. What were you saying?
Well, there's so many shows to talk about. I mean, you mentioned Curb Your Enthusiasm, and the thing I would say that probably works in its favor more than anything, number one, is its Emmy history. I mean, every year that it's been eligible, except for the first season, it's been nominated for Best Comedy Series. So it feels like a default check-off nominee. But also, you know, with Veep out of the running, HBO has only Curb and Silicon Valley to compete. Well, I mean, they've got other shows like Insecure and things like that. But those are their two. Those would be their two chief horses in this race. So, I mean, you can probably expect a lot of push for that. Plus, I mean, you know, Larry David is, you know, as disgruntled as he is a great spokesman for the show, you know, and could help remind people of it. But yeah, I mean, I'm looking at these last year's nominees, and I'm wondering if there are going to be more shows that drop out other than the 2 obvious ones. You know, I mean, what from last year seems like the likeliest to get back in?
Yeah.
I think Modern Family is in its first very precarious position because for the first time in its run, it wasn't nominated for SAG Ensemble. And we're talking about a show that won 5 consecutive years.
Yeah, that doesn't help.
That's their branch.
I think Blackish is slightly vulnerable. I think the heat has slightly come out of that show, unfortunately. I think it's so deserving. But yeah, that could be vulnerable. What about...
It depends on what ABC wants to do. Like if ABC goes all in on Roseanne, then yeah, it could be vulnerable. Yeah,
that's true. What about you guys? Matt, Riley, Tony, what do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think with terms of shows returning, I think you most likely are Atlanta, that was last year's sort of runner-up, and Silicon Valley, which has been nominated for every season that the show's been on air, even the first, which a lot of people weren't necessarily predicting it. So I think it's interesting. I think Silicon Valley is could be in a position which Veep was in a couple of years ago, where it had just consistently been nominated, not just in series, but also getting writing and or directing nominations every year. So clearly that's a show that has had consistent support over many years in the Academy. And if they have their best season this year, if when this season airs it has buzz, people are talking about it, I think it's in a good position to take it out. I think Curb Your Enthusiasm, the other HBO show, the reason why I'm predicting it at the moment is just similarly that I know it had a strong season, and also it is the overdue show. I'm not sure if you can find many other shows that have had a series nomination as many times as Curb Your Enthusiasm and not gone on to win an Emmy for best series. And I think it's well placed. Last year's winner is out. I think it's the kind of show, Curb, that is in the industry wheelhouse, the type of show they like to award. And so I really think, and also unlike a lot of the other revivals this year, Curb Enthusiasm in the past has had years out of the Emmy race and returned. It's never had a hiatus or a break this long, but it has sat out of the Emmy Derby a year or two, then come back with nominations, even when there's been more buzzed fare. And it's, I think, the only revival that got nominated for its last season.
Right.
It never got technically canceled, you know? I mean, it never actually ended, so...
I don't really view it as a revival like Roseanne or Will and Grace, where they had series finals and now have come
20
back.
years. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Arrested's a whole different ball game as well, where they ended their last season on a cliffhanger. So we always knew there was going to be a return in some form, whether it's a movie or a show. The question was just when and how.
Yeah.
I wonder if the Jeffrey Tambor of it all might sink that show, though. I know we probably.
Well, we know Transparent won't be anywhere near the Emmys this year.
No.
Well, can I just say, even before that scandal, that last season was not.
Oh, I agree, and I'm you know me, I'm the resident Transparent #1 fan. So that last season was going to be definitely problematic at the Emmys. But one show that I do want to put in a bit of a plug for is Netflix's One Day at a Time reboot, which is by far, in my opinion, the best comedy on TV that I've seen this year. It took what I thought couldn't be done, which is make the multicam comedy not just funny but relevant and emotional. Daniel Montgomery wrote a big piece about it recently, and that's a show that really just resonated with me this year. And there's currently a big push for Netflix to renew it. So I hope that gets some love, because I think that show is just magnificent.
For Netflix and Amazon, this is a really big opportunity for them, because they kind of look they've got to be a little embarrassed that they let the series, like the first series to win an Emmy from a streaming service, go to Handmaid's Tale. So this is the last kind of one they can claim as being the first streaming service to win Best Comedy Series. So for both of those streaming services, this is a big deal for them, whether it's Glow or One Day at a Time or Mrs. Maisel.
Development, yeah. And the thing is, like,
movie though, which was earlier in the evening than The Handmaid's Tale.
I won TV movie. Come on.
True.
They were the trailblazers.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, with Arrested Development, Matt wrote to many of us by email midweek asking, why isn't Arrested Development more of our predictions? It's a really good question. It made me think, and it's just because, for me, it's just so completely unknown, and because the last time it didn't do so well with the Emmys, and there were reasons for that some of us, explained away and justified. But I'm going to park Arrested Development until I've seen it and seen how the critics respond to it, and then maybe that might take the place of Glow or Will and Grace that I have at the end of my predictions. But it's an unknown really at the moment, but I'm curious to see how it will go, because obviously when it first came out, it was massive.
Could I just say on Arrested Development, the last season was structured very differently to the 3 previous seasons, and I believe got an incredibly unfair review from the New York Times as it got released, which sort of shaped the narrative as to how that may have been perceived by the industry. It was a much harder series to digest and was released quite late in the Emmy calendar, whereas from what I understand, this season is going to be structured more similarly to the first 3 seasons, because they were able to actually get the whole cast together to shoot it. And because of that, I think even if you haven't seen the whole season, it will be a bit more satisfying, I would imagine. And it's worth remembering, this is an important show in Emmy history, Arrested Development. This is a show that they probably had a huge hand in saving. By giving it a win for its first season, they were able to, the Fox sort of, there was pressure on them to renew it for a second and sort of third season. So I sort of feel like the critics played a hand too, but I think the Emmys have an important, and they've really took ownership of that show. That had a Best Series win from them, but it never really got embraced as much by the Globes or the Screen Actors Guild. So I just feel like if this season is very good, we sort of know it's in the Emmys wheelhouse.
Let me ask you, Riley. Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to sort of, while we were doing Emmy FYCs, Tony earlier about One Day at a Time, I just, I wanted to make a plug of my own for a show that's now in its second season and got no attention whatsoever last year, but The Good Place.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, if there's any justice in the world, some of these empty slots will be taken up by that and series and Kristen Bell and Ted Danson. And I mean, Matt, what you were talking about, that's a show that really could be helped by some Emmy love. I mean, I guess it's kind of cult status right now, very much like Arrested Development was during its run. And I mean, it's by far the best comedy that's on network television right now.
I always wonder if that show would do better under a binge watch scenario. Like you just sit down and watch all 12. But I love it.
Well, actually, it's funny because in Australia, it's on Netflix. And that's sort of how most of my friends have digested and gotten into that show is through sort of binging the first 2 seasons. Yeah.
I was going to ask, do you know if Jason Bateman, because he got nominated for the revival, if he gets nominated for comedy and drama actor, would he make Emmy history?
He would. We were just talking about that last night.
He could also get nominated for drama directing.
That's not going to happen. But
I don't know. But pilots do very well in directing.
They don't nominate actors, though. They have a strict no actor drama policy.
Can we get a final thought from Riley on comedy series before we move on to the actors? Riley, what do you reckon?
Yeah, sure. I do think The Good Place will get nominated for one nomination because they have a new sound editing category. There's lots of sound effects in that show.
I hope it's more than that. It deserves a lot more than that.
Hallelujah.
Yeah.
So funny.
Kind of along that vein, Will and Grace, I think, will get a directing nomination this year just because there's a new rule kind of created by the Big Bang Theory director who's now on the board of governors for the Academy. Now the comedy directing category must have one multi-camera nominee. So watch out for that one. Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
This month.
All good for Jimmy Burrows.
Yeah. But with Will and Grace and Roseanne, I feel like they feel kind of dated, where I think Curb Your Enthusiasm, it's the other way, where I think it actually would do better in the current Emmy climate than when it was on the air like 10 years ago. Because Veep in Silicon Valley, they just get nominated for a ridiculous amount of technical awards, all the writing, directing, editing, cinematography over Atlanta and Master of None and sound mixing. They just check those shows off wherever they can. And now that Veep is out and Curb Your Enthusiasm is in, and it's all the same writers and producers doing all 3 of those shows to some extent, then I think that'll slide in there. At the beginning of the season, I was predicting Curb Your Enthusiasm would win Best Comedy Series, kind of for those reasons. But the season, it did kind of come and go, and the reviews were not that great. The ratings were down. But then at the end of the year, when they had the Producers Guild, Screen Actors Guild, it was nominated for most of those. Same with Silicon Valley is nominated for most of those, but they still have that major hole with the Actors branch and the Actors Guild. So that's why I have The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, because I don't think either Curb Your Enthusiasm or Silicon Valley is the complete package, but I think they're mostly there. But, at the Emmys, Veep seems to have a new challenger every year, whether it's Transparent or Atlanta or Modern Family was coming up against Orange is the New Black. And the Emmys do tend to go for the safer option, which in this case I would say is actually Curb Your Enthusiasm, even if it's never won before.
Cool. Well, I just received a text from Chris Beecham, who has just arrived on the Disney lot for the Roseanne premiere, so he'll have lots to talk about. He's going to meet with all of the cast, and I think that's going to be a huge push. So I think Roseanne is the one to watch in terms of what will happen in comedy. It's the exciting race because of that, and because of all the new shows revivals, Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. So there's a lot to talk about. Let's talk about the actors briefly, because we've gone a little bit over in terms of talking about comedy. I think with the actors, what I'm thinking is you take out Jeffrey Tambor, you take out Aziz Ansari, and then for me, I've just slotted in Larry David and John Goodman. And then everybody else returns, including Zach Galifianakis, fingers crossed for baskets. I'm opening it up to the field, everybody. Do you think that's generally the way we look at comedy actor?
Well, I'd say
Go for it.
Go ahead. Ladies first.
No. Oh, thank you. As long as Silicon Valley doesn't have like this knockout season that makes you go, oh my God. Like, oh my God, let's get Middleditch back in there, because I think Galifianakis is probably the person who knocked him out last year. So I think those are the ones. We don't really know how big Goodman's role is yet. He might go supporting. You never know. I think he'd probably say lead, but
yeah.
I was going to say that, I mean, Galifianakis is probably the most likely to not come back. I mean, speaking of Thomas Middleditch in Silicon Valley, it could be that kind of like, you know, one and done, or like sporadic kind of nomination. In which case, I don't know, maybe Eric McCormick in Will and Grace, you know, he kind of came and went throughout that category during the original run, but he was the only one that got nominated for a Golden Globe. So maybe there's something to that. I mentioned Ted Danson earlier for The Good Place. Everybody mentioned Jason Bateman as well. I think that's probably the, you know, throw in Thomas Middleditch, that's probably about the extent of the people who are in the comedy actor race.
I'll say two more people.
Not true. That's not true. I was going to say, no one's saying my winner prediction, Bill Hader for Barry.
Oh, we forgot about that. If that's great, yeah. Yeah,
you think he would win?
Yeah.
Oh man,
well, Unseen it's hard, but
bragging rights. That's great.
But Unseen it's hard, but yeah, he could definitely. The show's airing, I think, right after Silicon Valley, so that could definitely sneak
It's a show. It's a showy role. It's a first season.
I'm going to watch it.
I think Bill Hader is very respected in the industry and comedy circles.
Have you seen it already?
No,
I've got the screen.
I've seen the trailer, Zach. I've seen the trailer.
I have seen the ads all over Hollywood, so I'll go into it with an open mind.
And he is the first actor on SNL in a long time to be nominated for supporting actor. So he kind of picked up. So he's on their radar. Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me.
Okay, that's a good one. What about from Tony or Riley? We haven't heard from you yet.
I honestly think that barring someone like a Bill Hader, I think it's just going to be who's going to play Also Ran to Donald Glover. The lead actor in a comedy category, they love their repeat winners. They particularly love to give somebody at least 2 in a row before they move on to someone else. But I think the Hader pick is inspired, and he's been everywhere. Plus, I mean, yeah, he's playing a hitman who actually wants to be an actor.
Sounds like a great show.
And he might have thanked him in his Emmy speech if he wins.
And so that's definitely one to watch.
Yeah,
I would add Matt LeBlanc for episodes, because he's actually never missed a nomination.
You're right.
It's never missed for writing. It's gotten in for directing. It's a show that the Emmys have really responded to for some reason.
It's a great show. I love that show.
It had a great final season.
Yeah, they love
right.
that.
I forgot about that.
That episode where his father dies, he's gold.
I thought you were going to say Man with a Plan, but episodes, yeah. That's
And then as for Bill Hader and Barry, I mean, like, if I hadn't seen the show, then absolutely I'd be predicting it for series, for actor, and honestly braiding everybody for night, also doing the same. But having seen the first 2 episodes, I just, like, really cannot. I hate that show. I think it's the worst pilot I've seen this whole season.
Really?
I don't understand how it has the 84 on Metacritic, right, which I would be pointing to otherwise. So, like, there's a good chance that maybe I'm just, like, the only one who will feel this way, since, based on their reviews, they're mostly positive. So I just really want to see how the audience responds to it, because the critics, they did watch all 8 instead of like 2 like me, so maybe it gets a lot better over the season. But then also I'm wondering if the audience will even want to stick around for that long.
The interesting thing with this race is that you've got all the people that you said, Rob, are returning, but you've also got Matt LeBlanc, Jason Bateman, and Larry David, who were all nominated in this category the last year they were eligible. And you've got Jeffrey Tambor as well, who was nominated last year. You've got more nominees in the, like, more contenders here that are actually in some ways returning nominees that all were nominated the last year than there are slots in this race. But I'm wondering if this year we have a bit of a purge in this category to a degree.
Wow.
Because there are so many like exciting people like Ted Danson, John Goodman, who I don't know if he was, oh no, he didn't submit himself for last year. He was eligible. But like, you know, you got John Goodman, you got Zach Galifianakis, you've got like, there's just so, like, I'm finding it really hard to, I want John Goodman in my lineup. I just can't find room for him at the moment.
Well, and how interesting that lead actor in a comedy over, you know, the last many years has been one of those categories where we're like, oh, well, yeah, it's kind of the same ones because who else is there? You know, that's where you get Matt LeBlanc over and over again. That's where you get Don Cheadle for House of Lies over and over and over again.
We don't need to bring that into this. Come on.
But now we've got like this, like, okay, we have to figure out where we're going to put people.
Yeah, isn't that
we
great?
could have 7 nominees. We could
great.
seriously see a tie and have 6 or 7.
And I think this is a really good chance for The Good Place. I think
absolutely.
Ted Danson is so well respected. I feel like the show does have a bit more like that cult buzz, passionate following this year than it did last year.
Yeah.
I think this could be a good chance for the Good Place. I think comedy series could be a little tough for them, and Kristen Bell could be a little tough. And there isn't in that show, I don't want to disparage anyone, but there isn't that iconic supporting character that, you know, you sometimes see break through. But I think Ted Danson, he's very well liked. He's very respected. The show's it's a funny show. I think that helps it.
You know,
he didn't get nominated for Fargo, though. I mean, that was kind of a tough year.
But like with the Good Place, I think we're onto something with Ted Danson. So we have to keep that in mind because he is very good in that show and he's getting a lot of great notices for it. I think that show should submit the second season premiere for writing and directing, and it could win because it was just the funniest thing I'd ever seen ever. And frankly, though, I still think that this is Donald Glover's to lose. That episode that I just watched, I think it was episode 3 with the $100 bill. I thought it was just absolutely fantastic. His performance is so like it's just so funny, but he doesn't even really do that much. I think he's totally got this, but I think Matt's call about Barry, we should probably take some notice of Bill Hader. Yes, that's a very good point. We've got to move on. With the actresses, yeah, it's a little different. It's not like I'm just switching people out who aren't eligible, because I don't think Jane Fonda will be back personally. I think Lily Tomlin is going to struggle, but she'll probably just make it in. I've got Alison Brie, Deborah Messing, Tracy Ellis Ross, Alison Janney. Thank God she's in lead and not supporting, so we don't have to have her go up against Laurie Metcalf, because then I'll shoot myself. And then, of course, we've got Rachel Brosnahan, who I can guarantee is going to win this one. I can't imagine her not winning it. And also, I'd like to hear from anyone who thinks she won't win first.
I've been having this reoccurring nightmare lately, and it's having to listen to Alice and Janney give one more acceptance speech this year. Because literally my biggest fear is Julia is out of the competition, and they're just going to default to Alice and Janney. Like, I'm not saying she's not good in that show, but that's my fear, is they're just going to go to the next most famous person. But
Alison Janney and Laurie Metcalf could win an Emmy on the same night.
They should present together. That would be awesome.
Well, you know what's interesting? You know what's interesting in this race is that with, I almost kind of wish that the old tape system was back, because it would be really interesting to see, like, you know, Rachel Brosnahan in that pilot of Marvelous Mrs. Maisel versus something like, again, I'm going to do my plug for Justina Machado in One Day at a Time, where she has this showcase episode. I think it's the 8th or 9th episode of the season, that is one of the most stunning half hours of television I've seen in recent years. But yeah, I do think that got to look out for Oscar winner Janny. You know, they could just see her name and check it off.
Yeah, they could.
My plug this year is for Catherine O'Hara on Schitt's Creek. She is amazing. And I too would love to see the tape system, because she has a knockout episode where her character is accidentally declared dead.
Could I say, if we had the tape system, like they used to have, where they got sent DVDs of the episode, there was probably more percentage of the Academy watching them. I would not count out Janny in that scenario. Yeah. She's very good in that show. She's very plays a very showy performance, and look at the performances we saw win under that system in comedy acting races. We saw Melissa McCarthy. We saw Julia Louis-Dreyfus from The New Adventures of Old Christine. We saw John Cryer from 2.5 Men. Like, Janny fits that bill very well, and I'd say she's better than probably. That performance is better than all the performances I just listed. I would not count out Janny to win this under the tape system or under the current system. I'm predicting Brosnahan. I think she's a tour de force in that pilot and the season, and she's a great actor. I can't say enough great things about Brosnahan in Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, but I would not count out Janny from winning this. Not just on Oscars, but it's the type of performance that we've seen win acting Emmy awards in the past, and they really like, and her Emmy history. She's upset some pretty competitive tapes in the past as well.
Let's not forget Jennifer Garner. We're going back to that win.
Oh my God.
Riley, any final thoughts on the actresses before we move on to supporting, and then we're done?
I would say Brosnahan would be a slam dunk under the tape system. I'm going with a very conservative lineup. I've got Jane Fonda coming back in. She got the SAG nomination. Grace and Frankie seems to be well liked by the Academy. It's getting, production design, costume nominations here and there. Every year I feel like we see some type of Phoebe Waller-Bridge or Broad City people come in, and it never really works out. They just go back to Jane Fonda, etc.
Yeah.
Remember? And by the way, it would be criminal if Pamela Adlon didn't get back in. That second season of Better Things was.
I can't see it happening. But you're right.
Yeah. She might be in trouble. She's probably the most of the people who were nominated last year.
And I think
what about Ellie Kemper? Do any of you guys have her?
I have her in my last slot.
Yeah.
Because I do think Ellie Kemper.
Oh yeah. Sorry.
I think, look, she didn't get nominated for the first season, which gives me a bit of pause. But I do think she is such a likable character in a show that's done well on the comedy series race. And she's the centerpiece of that show. So I think she's, I don't know. I'm on the fence about her. And Jane Fonda are sort of the two I'm tossing up. And I've dropped out Jane Fonda because Jane Fonda hasn't been nominated for every season.
Could Tracy Ellis Ross be in trouble?
Yeah, I actually don't have.
I think so.
I don't have Tracy Ellis Ross in right now. And it's really just like a, making room for other people type thing.
She had a great season.
She had a very good season.
No, she did. Yeah.
And the good thing with Tracy Ellis Ross is I don't see as the actor and comedy series race. There are so many different directions that they can go, and they might go away from Blackish. In the actress category, even though there's a lot of contenders, I don't see as many different paths or combinations, and that might help Tracy Ellis Ross.
Yeah. Let's move on to supporting actress, staying with the women. Kate McKinnon, I think most of us have her out in front. I think we'll keep doing that until she loses. Oh, you don't? We'll go there in a sec. I have Megan Mullally coming back. Laurie Metcalf, obviously. Leslie Jones, I hope will come back again. I'm going with Rita Moreno. On Tony's thoughts about One Day at a Time, I think she'll probably be the only one who might squeeze in. After seeing her at the Oscars, I just thought, I think she might have a shot. And then Alex Borstein as a surprise. But there's a lot going on in supporting actress. So why don't we go to you first, Zach? You don't have Kate McKinnon out in front. Why not?
Because I feel like this season of Saturday Night Live has not been as buzzed about as last year or even the year before. it kind of feels like sort of the same thing over and over again. It doesn't feel as, like people aren't talking about the sketches on Sunday mornings as much as they were last year. So I still have her getting back in, but I don't think she's going to win a third in a row. She might. We know they just kind of default to that person, but I think it's going to be either. Speaking of going back to old habits, I think it's between probably Megan Mullally and Laurie Metcalf.
Wow.
I can see Mullally winning as sort of like an award for the show, and if they're going off of tapes, then the Rosaria's Quinceañera is a very good episode for her, and one of the few that really gives her a lot to do. So I mean, it might just default to her. And Laurie Metcalf, again, I haven't watched the new Roseanne yet, but she did win this award 3 times, and maybe this will be like hey, we're sorry you didn't win an Oscar. Welcome back to the world of winning awards for television.
True.
So
you know what, man? She is. I'm telling you, she's so good in the new Roseanne. I don't think you're onto something.
And she got 2 or 3 Emmy nominations a year ago.
Yeah.
So the TV Academy are very high on Laurie Metcalf. Yeah.
Maybe I should switch that. So does anyone else want to talk about who we haven't mentioned yet, perhaps?
Alex Borstein. That's the one I want to. I love her on that show. She's so great.
Did you say Becky Gilpin as well, or
she could win? She's I think got a really good chance.
Alex
of winning.
Borstein, yeah. Has she won an Emmy before for Family Guy? I can't remember, but
no, she hasn't.
Okay,
but she's one of that shows starts going on goes on a roll. She's gonna go along for the ride.
The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel could have a night that very much reflects the Handmaid's Tale last year.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because it could win. Jane Lynch could win Guest Actress hands down.
Yeah.
What about
one more person is Judith Light, who's been nominated the last couple of years. Both Transparent and Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt got about a half dozen nominations last year. I'd say both are in danger of getting 0 this year.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Well, if no one has anything else to add, I want to move on to the supporting actor races. That one's really interesting to me because I'm not sure about Alec Baldwin for the reasons that Zach just mentioned about Kate McKinnon. And I'm hoping and praying that I think Brian Tyree Henry will actually make it in this time for Atlanta. He didn't last year, but he did get the nomination for This Is Us as probably a consolation. And I think Louis Anderson will be back. I think Titus Burgess and Sean Hayes are going to fight this out. The 2 kind of flamboyantly gay characters will fight this out to the death for the trophy. And Mark Maron, surprisingly, I thought he was excellent in Glow. I wasn't expecting much from him. And I think he'll get there. He got the SAG nomination. So am I right? He got the SAG nomination, right?
Yeah.
That's where I'm at with supporting actor. So what do you guys think? Is there anyone else that is in the mix? 2 people
that we should look out for. Kumail Nanjiani. If he has a knockout season off of all of his Oscar buzz, he could win this. And Emmy favorite, I think he's a 4-time winner, Tony Shalhoub from Marvelous Miss Maisel. I have him nominated, but if he gets in, he could definitely be the winner. He's hilarious in that show as her father.
So I do not have Alec Baldwin coming back.
I agree.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that.
I'm hoping against hope that this could just be the year that Titus Burgess finally wins. He should have won last year. He should have won the first year. So I'm just predicting him by sheer, just will alone. But I think that there's also, you mentioned Tony Shalhoub. I think he's got a really good shot. I think Sean Hayes has a really good shot.
Amazing, man.
I also have Brian Tyree Henry getting in and Mark Maron getting in. Kumail Nanjiani may be onto something. He did just get an Oscar nomination. It'll depend on how good the season is. But I rounded out my 6 with Louis Anderson.
Who's still deserving, still great as Christine Baskets. Tony, what about you? What do you think of the supporting actors?
It's interesting. Until I see the new season of Kimmy Schmidt, I've got Sean Hayes in number 1. Both on the season, and he's got a killer episode when he finds out that when he meets his grandson. That episode is hysterical and surprisingly touching. It's like one of the few. He gets both his over-the-top caricature Jack moments, but also some really like lovely scenes with the grandson. But I think everybody's spot on. Brian Tyree Henry, they better not leave him off this year, or else I will pull a Charlie Bright and throw something at my computer screen.
Oh, there's a reason to vote against him. Come on.
That's crazy.
But yeah, I think what everybody said is dead on this race.
I'll add Tony Hale for Arrested Development. The last time Arrested Development was on, Tony Hale didn't even submit because he was submitting for Veep instead. And then he went on to surprisingly win. And then he won again later. So
good point.
That's who I have.
Guys. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Titus Burgess is first in the prediction center, but I think he is in danger of a snub. I mean, SAG dropped him. SAG also dropped Ty Burrell. You have to think like who's, on stabler ground. It might be the guy who's been nominated, 8 or whatever times.
Yeah.
Who else? I think Mark Maron will win. Alec Baldwin, I don't think is even going to submit in supporting because like last year he was in like 16 episodes. This year he's in like 6. Like,
oh, right.
Like I imagine that he's not even of the mindset of himself being a supporting player this year. I think he kind of, comes in once every couple months this year, and he hasn't hosted anything. So I imagine that he'll ultimately submit and guest. And as for Brian Tyree Henry, like it's very common that we don't see supporting people who are unknown on new shows get nominated for first years for first seasons. I mean, you look at something like Mad Men where, Elizabeth Moss wasn't nominated, or Christina Hendricks, she went on to get 6 nominations. She wasn't nominated that first year. Jane Krakowski for 30 Rock. And, there's just many of these examples. So I think he'll get in this year.
Final thoughts, Matt?
This of all the races we've talked about is the one I'm finding the hardest to get a bit of a handle on. And I've really got no idea who will win this, I think, until we see who actually is nominated and maybe even how some of these series have done with nominations, like see what shows are sort of the Academy in the Academy's favour. I totally agree that Tony Hale should not be discounted. I think he could win again. I think he's been nominated every year. I think his performance on Veep is going to be in the minds of voters as they're thinking about him also being in Arrested Development. And from where last season left off, it seems like Buster is going to be a character very much at the center of the 5th season of Arrested. So I can't imagine he's not going to have some good stuff to do. I think also if Will Arnett has a great season, don't be surprised to see him contending in this race. I just think there's just a lot of different combinations. I think no one much is safe in this race. Even someone like a Sean Hayes, I guess you could see just Will and Grace get completely forgotten. They've just moved on. I think that's unlikely in the case of Sean Hayes and Megan Mullally, but you just don't know. I don't think anyone I'm confident in predicting in this category, and there's a lot of people I'm not confident in leaving off the list.
Yeah. Good point. By the way, I'm really confused. Who's Alec Baldwin? I thought it was Alex Baldwin, but anyway, it's a whole other thing. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back to talk about drama, and make sure you all stick with Gold Derby throughout Emmy season. This is obviously the place to be.
Yeah.